Start recording. So we're at the DOM. So we talked about JavaScript. We know that JavaScript runs inside the browser. We know that we can do variables, we can do some types, we can do some basic algorithms, and that's all fine and dandy. We can print stuff out to the console, which is awesome. Cool for us as developers. Not so cool if you're a user, right? So how do we get our stuff to the user? Well, this is where something called the DOM comes into play. The DOM stands for Document Object Model. And this is, in a nutshell, it is a fancy term for the HTML that's on the page. That's it. The DOM is the more technical definition that it is a tree structure representation of all the HTML nodes on your page. So what's a tree structure? Has anyone heard of that phrase before? Right? It's a little nice little simple thank you for wiping out the whiteboard for me. Whoever did that, thank you. So like this is a simple tree structure. The DOM is the tree structure of your HTML. So what that means is that like here is the HTML tag. Here is the head tag. Here is the body tag. Here's a meta tag. Here's a title tag. Here's a section. Here's an A tag, here's a P tag, here's a span. So it's creating this tree-based model that you can do something called querying with JavaScript, which is what we really care about. But like I said, the DOM is a term for the HTML. That's it. That's a good working knowledge definition. So, what we can do is that we can query the DOM using the same selectors that we were using in CSS to target elements. So if I wanted to query for all H1 tags, I would use the H1 selector. If I wanted to query for everything in my HTML that has the class myParagraph, I would do .myParagraph. If I wanted to query for my profile picture that has an ID of my profile, I would do hashtag my profile. The exact same selectors that CSS has work also to query in the DOM. So what's one thing that comes with the DOM that is very predominant is something called events. Has anyone heard of this term before in regards to programming? Yes, Dan, what's a good?
Well, when you click a button, an action happens. Essentially, it's waiting for a response.
So when you click a button, an action happens, and it's waiting for a response. That's actually a very good definition. It's whenever something happens, it's waiting. First off, it's waiting for something to happen, and then it's going to run a chunk of code. So in Daniel's example, there's a button on the page. There's an on-click event that is going, whenever we click the button, it's going to fire off that event. It's going to run that code. So it's just waiting there patiently until the user clicks the button. Then once it clicks, it runs the code. So on-click is a very common example. Does anyone else know of any other events? Mouse move, scroll, documents ready. So that means that the whole DOM is loaded. Hover over, hover off, active, focus, blur. So there's a whole bunch of these different JavaScript events. I don't expect you to memorize them all or know them all, but just know that almost everything you do inside of the browser has its own event. So I mentioned that an event waits for something to happen, then it fires off a chunk of code. Well, that chunk of code that we register to the event is called a function. So function is a reusable chunk of code that we can call from any other piece of code. So what that means is that we put our algorithm, our logic, inside of something, a function, and we can put that chunk of code now called in a function attached to something, either an event, maybe another function, but we can reuse it, we can call it someplace else.
So it's like a class?
Sort of like, it's like a class except for JavaScript.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good
Same
way to put it.
principle?
Yeah, same principle.
Okay.
How last week we made a class for centering content. We can think of that as a function that we can plug into anywhere that we want to use it. Okay? Okay. Good. How are we? Did I thoroughly confuse all of you? Good. Chris, you were going to ask something?
Oh, is there any like a class you could use many times in ID? You can only use ones that are functions that you can only use once.
Nope. Once you make a function, you can use it as much as you want. I say that, but now I want to correct that statement. So functions are typically named. So if we have a function called sum, we can guess it takes two numbers and it will add them together and return the sum. All right, so now I can call sum anywhere I want inside of my code. There's something that's called a named function. There's something called an anonymous function, which is a function that we make in line that we're only going to call once. We'll see an example of that today.
Is that under?
Hmm?
Is that like underscore name?
Nope, it's just like equals function.
Oh.
Yeah, way more generic than that. All right. So let's see some code. Okay, we good for that? So I'm going to take what we have here, and I'm going to bring back the code that was here whenever we first opened up the file. So let's see what's going on. So we have const main. So we now that we're doing up a new variable, right? We see constant, that's variable, and it's called main, equals parenthesis, arrow, squiggly brackets, and some code. This is the modern syntax for creating a function inside of JavaScript. So this right here is a function. This is where a couple hands will probably go up.
So the equals greater sign is a pointer?
It's just a syntax. It's not a pointer, but it's just an arrow pointer. It's just an arrow. It's syntax.
It's saying function do this thing.
Yep.
Pointing to the.
Yeah.
So what is it pointing to?
So this squiggles, whenever you see this arrow function squiggles, that's a function.
So the function in there is document.querySelector,
Yep.
page one.
So this function contains lines of code that we want to call someplace else. This is the line of code that we want to call. This is our first interaction of interacting with the DOM. So the document, it comes with the browser, and that is essentially the DOM. All right? So I'm saying, hey, I'm querying this. I want to find
H1.
all the H1s and their text content, so whatever's inside of them, their actual content. I want to add a question mark to it. So that's what this line of code is saying. So that function, that algorithm, I'm wrapping up in a function, and I'm calling it main.
So it's gonna find hello world in this case and add the
Question mark to it. Yep.
I'm sorry, going back to the construct of the function.
Yep.
It used to, correct me if I'm wrong,
Not today.
not today. The function was typically defined with the keyword function in front of it.
Yep.
Now it's being replaced by the equal greater sign
Yes.
as a lambda.
Yes.
Okay.
There is a lot more to that, but not today.
Okay. Now
That's why this is the modern approach. There's another approach, but not today. So we're saying, hey, I'm wrapping all of this into a variable called main. So my main is now a function. You know how I talked about variables have types? the types we talked about were number and string, right? Well, now here's a new third type. It's a type function. So now I can pass this function around as a variable.
Would you just say let instead of constant if you wanted to be able to change the function?
Yep.
Is there any point at which you would want to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like an example of that is I want to change how my thing reacts to something. You'll see examples of that at a later point in time. But this idea is now functions can now be chunks of data that can be passed around to other functions. So we're creating our Lego blocks here. Our variables are chunks of data. Now we can plug them in anywhere we want. Right? We've created this capsule, this unique module, and it's like, hey, I want to use this someplace else. So where do I want to use this? I want to register this to an event on my page. So I'm going to go to the document, the DOM, the document, and I'm going to add event listener on line 14. Add an event listener. I'm listening for the event, DOM content loaded. What can we guess that is?
When the DOM is loaded.
Yeah, when the page is loaded. So when the page is loaded, I want to run this function, main.
So is query selector and add event listener are those functions themselves?
Yep.
That are from the document.
That is from the document API.
Okay.
So as Chris said, these query selectors and add event listeners are functions themselves. You see how these ones have parentheses after them. And we're passing stuff in. Those parentheses say run this function now. Whatever's inside of those parentheses are parameters that we're passing into that function. So here, our query selector has one parameter, right? And that's the query that we want to run. Here, our add event listener function has two parameters. The event that we're listening to, and what code we want to run whenever that event fires.
So, wait, like,
Yeah, this is a lot.
I'm just confused with what actually happens. Like, it says when the DOM content loaded, then it comes up with that main, which equals a question mark, right?
So whenever this main is called,
Yes.
it's going to go to the document. It's going to run whatever code is inside of main.
Yes.
So this is going to go find all my H1s and add a question mark to their content.
So, like, if I'm looking at a web page, it's going to load, and there's just going to be a question mark at the end of every.
Yep, every
H1
yep,
That's it.
that's it.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure I'm following.
Yep, oh yeah. So let's run this and see what it's doing. So this is our JavaScript. Let's pop over to HTML. We have one H1. So it's going to go in, it's going to find this H1, and it's going to add a question mark to this. So if I come over here, if I refresh the page, ta-da, you see that it's running the other code, right? That was still there. And then it's listening for this event.
Quick question, just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Why would it work if you just had a plus sign instead of a plus equal?
Great question. So this plus equal, so we know that we can do total equals 2 plus 2, right? Total will be 4, right? Let's say that I want to add to it. Total equals, I just want to increment it by 2 again, and that's it. For whatever reason, doesn't matter the reason. I can do something like this. I can go, hey, take my total, and it's going to be equal to whatever the current total is plus 2. So now I'm incrementing my variable by 2 every single time, right? Well, this plus equals is the first example of what's called syntax sugar, or syntactual sugar. And all that means is that it's a shortcut or a fancy way to do something else. So this plus equals is a fancy syntactual sugar way to write this statement. So these two statements are equal. It's just saying take whatever's on the left-hand side and add whatever is on the right-hand side to it.
So the 2 lines in top are,
Yep, so 15 and 17, these two
Are the
lines are exactly, they do the exact same thing. Why would someone pick this syntax over this syntax? Personal choice.
So, going back to the actual string, right? The reason I asked is because you're basically concatenating 2 strings, or two
Yeah.
2 strings. So, do you really need the equal sign?
Yes,
Oh, you do?
yes, because we're not storing it then. We're just adding it together, not storing it anywhere. So we need to have the equal sign here so we actually store it back inside of the content.
Okay.
That you wrote there doesn't do anything.
Right here, no,
If
it's
you run it, it's not going to do anything.
not going to show. It's not going to show us anything. We're not interacting with the console or the DOM anywhere. So
It's gonna do something.
it's going to do something.
Yeah, in there,
Yep.
you will notice.
Right. That's an idea. Something of like abstracting things from the user.
like.
Is that because you didn't assign a variable to total?
Because I'm not interacting with the DOM or interacting with the console at all. The user doesn't know that this is happening yet.
So document.query selector and then dot text content. So the dot text content, is that just saying after you find those H1 tags, do the H1 tags themselves have those text content attribute?
Yep. This is a property or an attribute of H1 tags. In fact, all DOM elements have that property, text content. It stands for what's inside of it.
It's like a default.
Mhm.
It's like a default content they have.
Yeah, it's like whatever is inside the HTML at that current time.
So you could replace the H1 with like a section or P tag or whatever,
You could.
and it just,
Yes, it just works.
okay.
That's a different story,
Okay.
but you can, because with that there's some security risks and stuff like that. Because you couldn't, in theory, inject script tags into anyone's DOM, and that's probably not a good sign because now you're running code in someone else's website. But in theory, you could. So you're on the right track. You're with the things.
So go back to the H tag, so it's a tag in HTML.
Yep. This.
So H1.
Yep.
And so H1, it reads it as so it's basically telling the script that whatever content is inside the tag,
Yep.
which in this case is H1. If it was a span or if it was a section,
Yep.
it would kind of go read what that is,
Mhm.
and then it would do
Whatever.
we're asking it to do.
JavaScript prototypes, or do you always have to define?
So there is something called prototype. JavaScript is itself a prototypal language at its core. That's nothing we're going to be talking about today or even in the near future. But yes, it is. You can.
You might be talking about this next, but when you put the dot text content, so can you put like let's say that you already in your CSS you have an H1 selector that has attributes like order, right? Would you be able to do dot order and then change the value that way?
There is a way to change the CSS on stuff. That's actually tomorrow's topic.
Okay.
Today is just interacting with DOM content in JavaScript. But yes. It's like .css.property, I believe, or something like that, instead of .text content.
And then IntelliSense helps you.
Oh yeah, IntelliSense helps out a lot. So now that we have our total, I'm just going to comment this out here real fast. Commenting in JavaScript, 2 dashes. Yeah. Yep. But just use your shortcuts and it'll be fine. So now let's add another event. Let's put a button on our page that whenever we click it, increments a counter on the page by 1. Does that sound good? That'll kind of tie everything together. So over here, I'm going to add a new section. Inside of this section, I'm going to have a a section with the class of output 0, and then we're going to have a button with a click to add 1. So that's all it did. Added 0, so our counter, we're going to click to add 1. So what we're going to do, we're going to add an event that listens for when we click this button. It's going to run a chunk of code to add 1 to that 0. So the first thing we need to do is we need to listen for the event. So document dot add event listener. And yeah, this is IntelliSense kind of helping us out a little bit. So this is all the events we could possibly have. So I'm going to do click, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Because we don't want to add it to the document, right? We don't want to add it so we click anywhere. We want to add it to that specific button, right? So instead of the document here, we want to query for our, we'll call it my button, and that will be a class. So our button has the class myButton. And whenever the page loads, it's going to say, hey, find me my button and add this event listener to it. So far, so good? We haven't defined what code we're going to run yet whenever it clicks. But I just want to define that we're adding the event. So let's define the code here real fast. So we're going to need to define a function of what actually executes whenever it gets clicked. So let's create a new function, const button click event. So new variable, constant, function, call it something meaningful. That we now know that this is the button click event. And right now it's an empty function, it does nothing. But I want to make it excuse me. So inside of my button click event, I'm saying my chunk of code that I want to run over and over and over again is I want to print something out to the console. And I said on line 23 that whenever that button is clicked, run my button click event. So now, whenever I click the button, it's going to print out to the console every time I click it.
So the console's like a checkpoint.
Yep.
It's like, okay, the function works.
Yep.
Let me add something meaningful.
Yes, this, so you remember how we do like, put a border on something last week to kind of like trace it out for us to kind of like see what's going on? Whenever we're debugging our CSS or doing things in increments. This is the exact same way. Is that I know my big goal my big user story, my big use case, is when I click this button, I want to increment this span by 1. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. This is us breaking down the problem into smaller chunks. So now I'm going to test this to make sure that this works inside of my browser. So whenever I reload the browser, I should see my button and my HTML should be untouched. And when I click that button, it should print out to the console, button was clicked. This is a good technique, especially for your homework tonight, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, to make sure that everything is hooked up correctly. And this is the first thing that I do and that I will always do, is make sure that your events are fired.
Just a quick question. In the add event listener, the first parameter, click, what is that? That is a string? Just a string?
Yeah, so the events are, you pass it in as a string, but those are specific events that the browser knows.
Okay, so that's the event.
Yep, that's the event.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So I'm saying whenever this button is clicked, run this code. So once
Listen for that event click, the event click.
the what?
Listen to the event click.
Yep.
And then run this.
Yep,
Okay.
Does it matter the order in which have?
it does. So it has to be this order. Event and then function.
Unless.
Nope. I mean, I guess.
You could do an assignment, right? You could do
I believe
event
so.
equals click.
I
Put
think.
it in the order.
I actually don't know in JavaScript, to be completely honest. Because assigning variables like that, I never was a fan of. So let's see if this works.
Wait, before you, so what, for debugging?
Yep.
These 2 lines, 22 and 23, is what you're going to add? Or is it just line 23 to check and make sure that what you're asking it to do is actually happening?
That's actually this console.log right here. Because if this event is listening correctly, I should see this inside of my console. So this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm trying to do. This is my validation that says, yes, I did it.
So the console log.
Yeah, that's your debugging statement.
It will log one time button.
Yep.
So the click, you're defining the click itself, like, in that.
Yep.
Like, if you went on click, that's like, yeah.
On click and click, they listen for the same event, but the actual event is called click. So does this work? Hey.
Oh, it's over there.
Yeah, it's over here.
Okay.
It's over here.
Just hit it 4 times, or?
So I clicked it. And if I can't keep on clicking it, as Gus pointed out, it's just going to keep on incrementing that counter of how many times I clicked it. Instead of reprinting it out over and over and over again.
And then it deletes? Well, you did that.
When I refresh the page, the console clicks.
Okay.
So does the script, how many times does the script run?
As many times as I click it.
So anytime you interact with the page at all, it refreshes the script?
No.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how does it know to go back to that function and say, and listen? Like, what does the event listener actually do?
The event listener, without getting too crazy into the weeds, because this is like next Thursday talk, it's listening, constant, it's looping and kind of like sitting there like, is this event firing? What events are firing? What events are firing? What events are firing? It's doing that really, really fast. And then as soon as we click it, it's going, what events are firing? Oh, the click is firing. That's registered. I'm going to go run that code.
Okay. And that doesn't take a lot of computing power to keep running like that?
No, it's nothing. It's just kind of like, anything happening? Anything happening? Nope, okay, cool.
So click is like an empty function that you haven't defined yet in the front.
Right.
When you define it, it's gonna have like increment.
Yes. Yeah. Right now it's not doing anything apart from logging out to the console. We wanted to do more things. Right? Right? We wanted to add one. So our problem that we're trying to solve is that we want to get the current counter, the current count. We want to add 1 to it, and then we want to update it. Update the DOM.
their account, like at the top corner, remember?
It's very similar to that, except we're not. It's like yes, very similar to that.
Okay.
Is that kind of idea? Like I want to be able to like increment that counter by 1.
And now we have a different syntaxes for the comment.
Yes. Comments are //. So now we have a problem. Let's kind of break this down a little bit to understand it. So in order for me to do this, I have to do a couple things, right? I need to query the DOM.
I remember when I was younger, my dad was typing, and I always used to hear him typing really fast, and he said it was always the backspace.
Oh yeah. Like it's like typing, especially in front of people. Like until you get up here and actually start typing out stuff like this, you never know that feeling. That's actually how I learned to code. Was when I was an intern, my senior developer would hook up my laptop to a projector, and it would be him, someone else, and another intern and myself. And the interns would take turns like actually like typing out the code that they're dictating to us. So it was nerve-wracking. Because like I was where you are, and like, could you imagine me like, hey Chris, plug in, now type this. Whew. Anyways, we want to take these in a couple steps, right? We need to break down our big problem into smaller problems that are a bit more manageable, right? Because we only want to do one thing at a time, because we're developers who like to tackle things one piece at a time. We want to query the DOM, that's one thing. We want to add one to the content, that's another thing. And then we want to put that value back into the DOM.
So the first one should be click, but you already had it, so that's already gonna put it in there.
Yep.
That will be our main logic problem. When the click happens, then all those 3 happen.
Yep. So I want to query the DOM for the current value. So this would be a new variable. We'll call it current value. I want to go to the DOM. Be like, hey DOM, find me. Not that one. Find me, and I believe I called it. It has the class output. Let's make this an ID. Give me my ID output and give me its text content.
Have it.
Yep, oh, big habit. I'm changing that one too for tomorrow. But yeah, text content. So now, just to verify that I'm getting the correct current content, I'm going to print it out to the console. Going in, querying the DOM, say, hey, look for something that has an ID called output. Give me its text content. And then I'm going to log it out to the console.
You know, log it out.
Yep.
Oh, it will say 0 there.
Great, that's what I'm expecting. My expectation that I set up as a developer, when I run this code, I should see 0 inside of the console. And I do. Yeah. Success. So now, what's the next thing I should do? I want to add one to it, right?
So current value equals plus equals 1.
So current value plus equals 1, right? Okay, why are you giving me an error? So my error here, current value is a constant. So everything should be defined as a constant unless you need it to not be a constant. Exactly.
Okay, it's a constant, it's a move.
Yeah, exactly. If it's constant, it's a thing. The reason why we do that, just to kind of give you a little bit of a preview, is that there's something in programming called mutability and immutable. So those concepts, mutable and immutable, are how can this value change and can it ever change? This program that we're building right now, this web app, is relatively simple, right? Like there's some JavaScript, there's not much going on. We don't have an authentication service, we're not talking to other websites, there's not a lot of events going on, it's relatively simple. As we build up and do more and more complex things, we want our data not to change as much as we possibly can. And using const is kind of our way as developers to kind of help ensure that those values aren't going to change over time unless we tell it to. Or using let.
Or a hacker can't change the value.
Right, or some other script can inject stuff or something like that. It's kind of a little bit of an extra security and really good practice.
Good question. So the object, the goal of this is to add one to the value.
Yep.
Why couldn't you do it the same way you did it up above in the string?
Because I like to break the problems out whenever we need to find a
But you
topic.
could.
Yeah.
The other question I have, in terms of syntactical sugar.
Yep.
Could you have plus current value?
You could, maybe, but probably. So on top of this, as V pointed out, we're just doing +1. +1 is very common in the programming world, which we'll find out tomorrow. We could shorten this down to ++ if we wanted to, just straight up add 1 to it. But I like calling it out, just to see that we're actually adding 1 to it. So now that I have the current value, I want to put it back inside of the DOM. So I want to query again, document.querySelector for output, text content. Now above we did plus equals, right? Here I just want to do equals current value because I want to override what's there. Right? I don't want to append onto it or change, concatenate what's there. I want to override it. So now it's going to go from 0 to 1, right? You want to see if this works?
Yep.
So if we add 1,
Oh, it's not adding, it's not summing, but adding the ones.
It's a string.
It's a
It's
string,
number.
Yep. Remember how I said types are kind of in the background? And everything has a type, right? So what it's doing is something called type coercion. Coercion. God, I can't say that word. It's saying, because remember this current value, if I console.log it using type of current value, it's a string. So what it's doing is that it's seeing this string 1 plus number 1. It's going, well, there's a string there, so I'm going to guess that you're trying to add these two strings together. So that's why we're getting this thing happening.
Binary.
Boop. That's not right, right? Right? So we can get around this if we convert our string to a number. So
Is that the same thing as casting?
it is. Casting, converting, parsing, they all mean the same thing. So let's get rid of, we know that this doesn't work. So, new value, we create a new variable to hold the new value, equals, we're going to do something called parse. ParseInt, current value, so this parseInt is part of JavaScript. And what it does, it's a function, so it's a chunk of code that's run over and over and over again. It's a built-in function that has one parameter, the string, and it's going to convert this string to a number for us. So we're saying, hey, parse this, convert the string to a number, then add 1 to it. And then store that in this new variable called new value. Then I want to take this new value and put it inside of my DOM. How are we feeling?
You go back again to the last change of type.
So,
Or could it be a simpler change type value or something like
% right here. Yeah, that's just what the built-in function is called, %. And what that is doing is converting the whatever string we pass into it. Because remember, current value is a string because it's coming from the DOM, so it's a string. And then we're saying, hey, convert this to a number. I know this string is actually a number. Convert it for me. So it's going to give me back the number, whatever the current number is. In this case, it's 0.
So wouldn't it not be a constant though, because you have the +1, so it would change? So what?
No, keep going. Like that's a very valid point. So now I'm doing some math before I assign it.
So it's okay that the new value is the constant, as long as current value is not a constant.
Correct. Or even current value can now be a constant
How can current value be a constant?
because we're not actually changing it.
It's only changing new values.
Right. We're not storing the new value of current value. We're not storing that 1 anywhere. I know, right? Just blew your mind. Because I'm not storing it anywhere, it's never actually changing.
So you're doing absolutely nothing?
That's a lot of stuff.
But I'm doing a lot of things.
To add one. To add one, that's all, to just add one.
Oh, yeah, it's all just add 1.
I'm very lost.
Yep. So let's back up a little bit here now. So first off, let's check to see if this works. So it's working. So that's good. Now let's dissect why this is working and how this is working. So this top line, on line 23, const current value. We're saying go to the DOM, find me the text content of the current output, so the current counter, and store it in a variable called current value. And I'm saying, hey, that's a constant. That's never going to change, ever. All right?
So it's 0.
So when we first load the page, it's 0. And the next line that matters get rid of these, is this right here. We're saying do some stuff and then store it in a new variable called called new value. So that stuff is saying, hey, take whatever the current value is, give me the numerical value of it. So if it's 0, if it's the string 0, give me the number 0, then add 1 to it, and store it in new value. So this calculation isn't changing anything, but it's giving me a new value, then we're storing it inside of the variable new
So
value.
that's taking a string and turning it into a number.
Yes.
So, going back to the const new value.
Mhm.
Once it's set, why are you allowed to change it again?
I'm not changing it.
Well, you've given it a new value. I mean, the first time around, right? You
Yeah.
have 1.
Yep.
So that's the value. That's
Mhm.
a constant value.
Yep.
And next time you click it, you're changing that value, aren't you?
Can I try?
Yeah, you can write it up.
Because now you're refreshing the function.
Yep.
Now the const current value is 1. So
Okay.
now you're storing
Yep.
a 1 instead of a 0, and then you're just adding 1 to that.
So that's
Yeah,
a
it's
good
good.
segue into something called scope. So scope is where variables, it's where you can see the values of certain variables. So every time this function is executed, every time we click the event, it's a brand new instance of that function. And every instance of that function has its own scope. So the first time I click this, I'm creating these two new variables. Once I'm done clicking it and it's done running, those instances of those variables are taken away. They're gone, destroyed. When I run it again, then it's going to create those variables again. So it's not carrying over every time we click.
So you could do those 2 steps in one, but it's best practice to not do them in one step.
Well, we could probably make this a one-liner if we really wanted to.
But it's about readability, right?
Exactly. The best code is always how well can it be maintained. This is very explicit. I like this code. Like this is probably what I would do if I was actually writing like production ready code,
Including the comments.
including comments. Yep.
So why wouldn't you, to avoid this recasting, type the variable or the object in the HTML?
You cannot type stuff in HTML.
You couldn't,
Everything in HTML is a string.
or
But could you define the value, so new value and current value, could you define them as numbers as opposed to strings?
That's an interesting idea. So the idea on the table is, could I define the current value as a number in JavaScript instead of in HTML? Could I?
Could you put
You could.
could you put parse int on the output tag or
On this line?
yeah.
Yes, so we're going to come back to that idea. We're going to follow Mike's train of thought real fast. So his train of thought is, instead of parse happening here, we do it up here. That works. That works too.
But you're still having to use that parse document query selector.
Yeah, we still have to take whatever's coming in from the DOM and then parsing it out as an integer. We're still doing, but this is a slightly different place.
So it's not like,
This is not your idea, quite yet.
Hmm?
This is not your idea, not quite yet. We're going to get there.
we're gonna simplify it?
We're going to do it in a different way. How are we with this way right here? Feeling okay?
I like it down here. It was more logical for me.
You like it down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up to you whether you put it on this line or this line. That is personal flavor. So where are we questioning stuff? Where are we finding?
I mean, whether you put it on the top or the bottom, it just seems like way too complicated.
Yeah,
That's wrong.
but this is, yes, Jason?
I understand it when you're, going left to right piece by piece, but just like sitting there with a blank JavaScript file, the order of things, hard to remember on the first day.
Oh yeah. This is like a new way of thinking. Like this is a new kind of like what's going on here. So if it looks intimidating, that's okay.
Is that gonna work? You save it and you look at it and the does it work?
Do we think that it'll work this way? Yeah.
Does it work from inside out? So you see the parentheses output?
Yep.
Does it say get the output class and or ID, then go to that, do that, and then parse it?
Oh, so to that. Okay.
Yeah, it's very math oriented. So if you remember your order of operations with parentheses, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally,
That makes sense.
it works in the same way. Just because it's sort of math based, don't let that scare you. How we feel? Better than 10 minutes ago? I'm still seeing some head shaking, no. Where did we get lost?
Can you run for me the new way of doing it? So you
Let's
move the parse
understand.
into
Let's understand it this way first.
Yeah.
Oh, it's this way. So all we're doing is we're saying, hey.
Parse in, yeah.
Yep, so this inside out concept, we're going to go to the inside most functions and run that first. So the inside most things, we're going to grab the text content. So we're going to take that content, whatever that is, and immediately parse it into an integer, so change it to a number, and store that as the current value.
I understand. You already changed it, and then that's why you run this one. It just add one line one.
Yep, because current value is now is no
Now
longer
it's
a
not
string, it's a number.
So the parse portion of it, that's just telling it it's not a string, it's a number.
Yep.
Or integer is the number, right? So parse integer is change this string, make it a number.
When you type that parse in, does it automatically goes to 0, goes to 1? What is it?
So what is this parse doing?
Right, because you're saying change this string
So let's
to a number.
Yep, so let's explore it a little bit. So over here in our REPL, our parseInt, if I pass it the string hello, it's not going to work right because it's not a number. We get nan, not a number. But if we pass it the string 1, 2, 3, it's going to give us back 123. We pass it 0, it's going to give us the number 0. So this is all it's doing. It's saying, hey, what string are you giving me? I'm going to try to my best to convert it to a number.
I don't know if it quite matters yet, but parse integer isn't going to take decimals, right?
Parse does.
It's going to, what's float, wouldn't it be float?
What do we think is going to happen if we pass it 1.4?
1.
And it always rounds down, doesn't it?
Up.
It's not a 0.5 thing.
0.5 will run up.
It should always
Oh,
round
it always
down.
rounds down. Okay.
So it just recognizes the first part of it and disregards.
Because
Yep.
an integer is all positive and negative whole numbers,
Plus 0, yes.
plus 0.
So is there a parse function for every data type?
We have parse float and parse int.
Float is your decimals.
Yep.
So float includes decimals.
Yep.
So it's parse integer, parse float.
And that's it. That's
Oh,
it.
because the string is default.
Yeah, string is just a thing. It's
So if
just
you
a
don't
string.
change it, it's just a string.
Yep.
If you need a number, then you change it.
Yep.
You could put a number into a string. Two string.
Yeah, but that's a different. So yeah, parse int and parse float. So with that being said, this here is this is a string, right? If I take this, come over here to my REPL, and I run it, it's going to give me the string 6. Because that's what's currently inside of the DOM. Right? So now I'm just saying, hey, parse int on 6, which will give me the number 6.
So is
Oh, I see.
so
Ah.
Blue light bulb.
Yes.
everything in HTML is a string.
Yes.
You now have a integer.
Yep.
Does it automatically recast back to string?
Yes. Yes.
Because it can only accept strings.
Correct.
So every time you have to do something, like you have to run that, you have to go back and say, this is a number.
So if you want to do math on it, you need to convert it to a number.
Do the math and then it displays the string.
Yep. So what else? How we feeling?
essay, do you have to have a variable? Can you just do it?
In one line?
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, it looked ugly and complicated, but.
Yeah.
How are we feeling? This is your time to ask questions. So for your homework, just kind of give you some context. For your homework tonight, you're going to create me a simple website that is a scoreboard for your favorite sport. There's going to be a couple different buttons. One will increase the score for the away team. One will increase the score for the home team. One will allow you to update the home team's name. And one will allow you to update the away team's name. So there's 4 buttons and 4 different events.
What if your favorite sport has 2 different types of scoring?
That is Adventure Mode.
Change the mode, change the score.
Yep. I have a simple mock-up for you to follow. And you create that first, and then you can add on stuff for your sports. Very similar to what we did here, right? We have a score inside of our HTML that we're incrementing by 1.
We are not getting the HTML, CSS.
Nope, yeah,
Mock-up.
Yep.
So we're doing everything.
You ready to get your hands dirty?
With a lot of questions, yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. So, as always, 2 o'clock. Bring questions to our afternoon review. Review at 2. And the assignment will be out momentarily.
Is that gonna become a hashtag?
Of course. It's already a hashtag.
Don't forget to use the horn.
Oh, yeah. Use the horn. However I do that.
So what, the one?
2.
The horn?
The horn is at 2.